The day I finished the divorce procedures, I booked a high-speed rail ticket to my hometown. My mobile phone, ID card, and a bank card with not much balance were all I had accumulated over the years. The housekeeper called me and said that I still had some items left and not moved away. Just throw them all away. I don't want them anymore. He then said that the young master was clamoring to look for his mother. He will soon have a new mother, the one he has been longing for before. The son I gave birth to is really similar to his father. Even the woman they love is the same. In the past, I would be sad, wondering why that person couldn't be me. Now I think, if there's no love, then there's no love. It's just like that. Before the high-speed rail started moving, I said the last sentence to the person on the other end of the phone. Tell him to rest assured. I will never disturb him again in my life. After saying that last sentence, I turned off the phone and changed the SIM card. From then on, this city had no connection with me at all. Sitting next to me was a little girl about the same age as my son, with round eyes, looking at me warily. I used to like children very much. But now, I don't like anything anymore. The little girl was not noisy and was well behaved throughout the journey. Instead, her parents were constantly making loud phone calls and cursing along the way. I simply put on my headphones and closed my eyes for a nap. I don't know how long it had been when someone carefully pulled my sleeve. I opened my eyes to look at her. The little girl pursed her lips. Auntie, my mother is gone. Can you help me find her? The position by the corridor of the 3-seat row was now empty. I didn't know what had happened. I called the train attendant and the railway police over at the first moment. After some investigation, it was found that the little girl's mother got off the train midway. Before getting off, she kept looking back warily as if afraid that the little girl would follow. In other words, the little girl was abandoned. The carriage was full of noise, all the voices of passengers discussing. They had no scruples and said in front of the little girl that her mother was so heartless and that she was so pitiful. The little girl remained sitting quietly in her seat, motionless, neither crying nor making a fuss. I thought for a while, showed my ID to the railway police, and left my home address and contact information. So when I got off the high-speed rail, in addition to my mobile phone, ID card, and a bank card with not much balance, I also had an extra child. I officially settled down in my hometown. I reorganized the desolate small yard and planted fruits, vegetables, and melons. I framed my grandma's portrait and hung it right in the middle of the living room. I gave the little girl a name, Song Xiao Xiao. I went through the procedures and changed her household registration. From then on, my household registration booklet was no longer a lonely sheet of paper. Xiao Xiao didn't like to smile at all. She always had a straight face and looked at me seriously. She understood everything. At such a young age, she was particularly mature. Even though she was only 4 years old, when I was sick, she would step on a stool to cook porridge for me. I thought of my own child. The young master of the Jiang family, Jiang Zilan, who would receive an entire ski resort as a gift when he wanted to ski and an entire candy factory when he wanted to eat candies. They were so different. Xiao Xiao asked me why I adopted her. She was just a burden. I touched her head and replied, because I'm lonely. So can you accompany me in the future? She looked at me, remained silent for a long time, and nodded vigorously. Okay. I'll accompany you for a lifetime. The days passed one by one like this. Xiao Xiao started kindergarten. Xiao Xiao started primary school. Xiao Xiao became the class monitor. Xiao Xiao fought with someone. I was very surprised when I received the teacher's call. Xiao Xiao was a well-behaved and obedient child with a very mature temperament. Let alone fighting with classmates, she didn't even want to give those children an extra glance. In her words, they were too childish. I rushed to the school in a hurry. The teacher came to greet me at the school gate. Seeing me, she also had a helpless expression. The child who fought with Xiao Xiao was a transfer student who just came today. Why did they fight? I just wanted to know this. When the teacher heard this, she gave me a slightly strange look. What? Little Jiang Zilan said that Xiao Xiao wanted to compete with him for his mother. What did you say? I stopped in my tracks. There is a photo of you and her in Xiao Xiao's stationery box. The teacher said, this photo was seen by Jiang Zilan. He said, He said that Xiao Xiao was shameless for competing with him for his mother. I stopped talking and just followed the teacher's footsteps silently. When we reached the office and the door was pushed open, the teacher looked back at me. By the way, Zilan's father has already arrived. I stood at the door of the office. I first glanced at Xiao Xiao, who was sitting in the corner and doing her homework quietly. Seeing that she was in a decent mood, I felt relieved. Out of the corner of my eye, the little boy who was throwing a tantrum saw me, his eyes lit up, and he ran towards me with his short legs. Mom. I bent down and caught Jiang Zilan. Instead of hugging him, I gently pushed him away. Little friend, you misidentify someone. I smiled slightly and raised my eyes to meet the gaze of the man in the room. Hello, sir. I'm Song Xiao Xiao's mother. I never thought I would meet Jiang Cheng again. The world is so big. People you don't want to meet naturally won't be encountered again. Jiang Zilan cried loudly, accusing me of not wanting him while crying. Xiao Xiao held the pen very tightly. I knew she was a little annoyed. Jiang Cheng stared at me without saying a word. I knew he was waiting for my reaction. Xiao Xiao. I helped Xiao Xiao pack her school bag. Can you go back first? Xiao Xiao nodded straightforwardly, picked up her school bag, and left without looking back. As soon as she left, Jiang Zilan quickly wiped away his tears, rubbed over, and hugged my calf. Mom, please don't be angry anymore, okay? I know I was wrong. I bent down, smiling and touching his head. Then I looked up at Jiang Cheng. Mr. Jiang, can we have a private chat? My past with Jiang Cheng was really unremarkable and not worth mentioning. When my grandma was young, she was kind to the Jiang family. It was said that she saved Jiang Cheng's grandmother who was kidnapped at that time. So over the years, the Jiang family always sent some gifts during festivals. After I was admitted to university, my grandma was old and couldn't handle the hassle. She was also worried that I would not adapt to the rhythm of the big city alone. So she contacted the Jiang family and entrusted them to take care of me. That year, when I came out of the railway station with large and small bags of luggage, I saw Jiang Cheng leaning against the car and casually playing with his mobile phone at a glance. He was really dazzling. So dazzling that I wanted to pile up all the beautiful words I had learned on him. It was normal to have a crush on him. I knew I wasn't from the same world as him and didn't think of anything else. The moon hung high in the sky. When I passed by and was bathed in the moonlight, I was already content. Jiang Cheng and I were in the same university. Occasionally, entrusted by the elders, he would bring some items to me. After some back and forth, we could be considered nodding acquaintances. Later, I heard about the love story of Jiang Cheng and his childhood sweetheart. The love of the protagonists was always full of twists and turns. They kept having luscious moments, quarrels, separations, and reconciliations. I was a spectator and occasionally felt lost. In my junior year, I started an internship. Because the company was far from the school, I always had to travel back and forth for a long time every day. I ran into Jiang Cheng once and casually told him about my recent situation. Not long after, I received a call from Jiang Cheng's grandmother. She said there happened to be an empty house near my company and asked me to move directly there. The kindness of the elderly is always hard to refuse. I was very grateful. After moving in, I found that the house was full of traces of Jiang Cheng's life. I felt that my thoughts weren't pure and could only keep all my items in that guest room to minimize my presence. Until that night, when I came home from overtime work, I found Jiang Cheng, who was drunk, lying confused on the sofa. I wanted to avoid suspicion but was also worried that he would catch a cold, so I took an air conditioning quilt to cover him. Jiang Cheng opened his eyes and looked at me. I thought he was going to question why I was in his house. But instead, he pushed me down and eventually made a big mistake. Now, actually, I don't remember the chaos of that night very well. The human body has a self-protection mechanism. Sometimes when it feels too painful, it will gradually forget. In my life up to now, I have only done that kind of thing once with one person. He called out someone else's name. Thinking carefully, it seems that so far, Jiang Cheng has only called my name once. On the day we first met, at the entrance of the railway station, he sized me up and said, "Lin Ji? I am." If life were only like the first encounter, why should the autumn wind sadden the painted fan? The campus was silent after school. Jiang Cheng and I stood at the end of the corridor, with a vibrant green behind us. Didn't you want to have a private chat with me? Jiang Cheng asked me. Just say what you have to say directly. Since he said that, I had no hesitation. What have you told Jiang Zilan over these years? What? We've been divorced for 4 years. These 4 years, I kept my promise and didn't show up. I also transferred the alimony to your card on time every month. Children's memories are very short. Besides, Zilan didn't like me as his biological mother before. If no one reminds him constantly by his ear, it's impossible for him to still remember me, and even have feelings for me. Jiang Cheng turned his head away and didn't look at me. I didn't tell him anything. It was Grandma who kept reminding him. Then why did he transfer schools? He's been insisting on coming to look for you. Jiang Cheng paused. I couldn't stop him. Yes, Jiang Zilan is the apple of everyone's eye in the Jiang family. What he wants, he must get. Even Jiang Cheng has no principles in front of Jiang Zilan. I lowered my eyelids and thought quietly. For a long time, I smiled. It doesn't matter. When his expectations are dashed, he will naturally want to go back. I am such a person who is never liked. When Jiang Zilan gets along with me for a long time, he will naturally find that it is his memory that constantly beautifies me. In fact, I am still that unpopular, annoying, and someone who can only lower his status, his biological mother. After I returned to my hometown, to make a living, I opened a small restaurant. Because I couldn't handle it alone, the reception was limited. Slowly, it actually gained some fame and was hyped into an internet-famous store by tourists. When Lin Ji was 18, she wanted to be a strong woman with an annual income of millions and studied computer science, which was easy to make money. When Lin Ji was 28, she just wanted to guard this less than 100 square meter store and spend the rest of her life peacefully. Since Jiang Zilan transferred here, after school every day, he would be sent to my store by the driver. He is a smart child and only showed his willfulness on the first day we reunited. Jiang Cheng rarely showed up. Most of the time, the person accompanying Jiang Zilan was the driver. I don't know what the Jiang family thinks. Since they attach so much importance to Jiang Zilan, how could they rest assured to leave him, a child, alone in this remote town? I didn't drive him away. He is the only relative related by blood left in this world for me. I once stayed up for 3 days and nights without sleep to take care of him when he had a high fever. I also had my hands cut and scarred in order to make the toy he wanted by myself. I have to admit that the essence of people is self-interest. When I did these for him, I didn't expect him to repay anything. But after my efforts, all I got was his disdain, dislike and loathing. I was a little sad. When he was very young, he was also attached to me. He had to have me accompany him when sleeping and had to be held by me when going out. I relied on his dependence on me to get through countless cold shoulders and grievances when I was in the Jian family. But when he began to have his own consciousness, learned to walk, and learned to say no, he gradually didn't like me anymore. Because I would stop him when he ate too much sugar and would educate him seriously when he was wayward. Children, unable to distinguish right from wrong and good from evil, only knew that I often restrained him, so naturally they were not willing to be close to me anymore. Until that day, Jiang Cheng took him out for a trip. After returning home, Jiang Zilan said righteously, I don't want you to be my mother anymore. I want Aunt Xia Ji to be my mother. You don't deserve to be my mother. Get out. This is my home. Song Xiaoxiao privately asked me if she could not be friends with Jiang Zilan. She didn't like him. Of course. I didn't care about it, but was still a little surprised. Why don't you like him? Song Xiaoxiao is a magnanimous child. She rarely expresses her dislike for another person clearly. Most of the time, she just doesn't care. He hurt you. Song Xiaoxiao's tone was calm and flat. You are sad every time you see him. I was stunned. He clearly knows you are sad, but still keeps showing up in front of you. Song Xiaoxiao said, lowering her head and looking a little sullen. Can I beat him up? That adult I can't beat for now. I can only beat Jiang Zilan. Song Xiaoxiao thought for a while. Mom, can you send me to learn martial arts? I will become very powerful, Mom. I will protect you. I promised to send Song Xiaoxiao to learn martial arts. She learned very seriously. The master said that your Song Xiaoxiao can endure hardships better than many older children. I remembered Jiang Cheng once pointed at my nose and taunted me, a woman like you, who will love you? No, Jiang Cheng. Grandma loves me, and Song Xiaoxiao loves me too. Now, I love myself too. Jiang Cheng would show up occasionally. Every time, he came in a rush, sat in my store for a while, ordered 2 dishes, finished eating, and then took Jiang Zilan home. Neighbors were all asking if Jiang Cheng was chasing me. They didn't know that Jiang Cheng was my ex-husband. They only knew that there was a diamond bachelor pursuing me, a middle-aged woman who was divorced and had a child. I denied with a smile every time, he's not blind. How could he like me? He came to pick up the child, not to pursue me. If before, I would guess what the purpose behind Jiang Cheng's actions was. But now, I have no curiosity about him at all. Whether he comes or leaves, I don't care. Occasionally, I would think about when Jiang Zilan would get tired of this boring game of pleasing his mother. He has stayed in this small town without an aquarium, an amusement park or a big shopping mall for almost 3 months. Perhaps the bad nature of what you can't get is precious is deeply rooted in everyone's bones. Even children are no exception. The colder I am to him, the more he wants to stick to me. He often had a lonely expression on his face. When I gently held Song Xiaoxiao's hand. When I bent down to tidy Song Xiaoxiao's skirt. When I secretly brought out the small dessert specially prepared for Song Xiaoxiao from the kitchen. But whenever I looked at him, he would sweep away the loneliness and show me a sweet smile. People's preferences always change with their feelings. When I loved this child, if he was slightly knocked or bumped, I would feel bad for a long time, but now, even though I clearly know he's pretending to be strong, I have no feelings anymore. I even think, why doesn't he leave? His presence here is really so annoying. I don't hate him. I just no longer like him. Early summer has arrived. After the closing ceremony, the summer vacation officially begins. That day, I opened the store as usual. Until I closed the door at night, Jiang Zilan didn't show up. I just thought he was finally tired of the boring game and was going to return to his identity and be a noble young master. When I returned home in the evening, I found him holding an exquisite cake box and sitting obediently on the steps at the entrance of the small yard. Jiang Cheng was also with him. There were also several gift bags beside them. The outstanding looks of the father and son attracted the amazed glances of the passers-by, but they only focused on what was in front of them. Dad, when will Mom come back? Very soon. We specially came to celebrate her birthday and prepared so many gifts. Will Mom be happy? She will. Upon hearing this, Jiang Zilan pursed his lips and showed an expectant smile on his face. He was wearing a very formal small suit and was specially dressed up. But the weather was sweltering. Maybe he had waited for too long, and there was a little sweat on his forehead. Or perhaps, he wasn't hot but just a little emotionally excited. I stopped not far away. But Xiaoxiao didn't stop at all and walked straight to the father and son and said crisply, "You are wrong. Mom's birthday is not today." "You're talking nonsense." Jiang Zilan rarely confronted Xiaoxiao directly. He knew that I loved Xiaoxiao and didn't want to arouse my dislike. Usually, he tried to avoid getting along with Xiaoxiao. But at this time, he stood up fiercely and retorted loudly, "Mom's birthday is today. She and I have the same birthday. I won't remember wrongly." Jiang Cheng saw me and also stood up. Without speaking, but there was a hint of expectation on his face. "Lin Ji." He called my name, unfamiliar and clumsy, "Happy birthday." I walked over, took out the key to unlock the small yard while looking at him calmly. "I forgot to tell you that I have changed my birthday now." Thinking for a moment, I said again, "But this kind of small matter should have nothing to do with you, right? I used to like celebrating my birthday very much." Grandma was a little old lady with a strong sense of ceremony. Every year on my birthday, she would prepare a big table of dishes, a beautiful cake, and an exquisite gift for me. There were only the 2 of us at home, but it wasn't desolate. Her health wasn't good and she couldn't travel long distances. But after I went to university and couldn't celebrate my birthday at home, every year at this time, she would definitely travel thousands of miles to the city where I was to accompany me to blow out the candles and eat the cake. When Grandma was alive, I was never lonely. On my birthday that year, Grandma still flew over to accompany me. At that time, I was pregnant with Jiang Zilan and it was already the 3rd trimester. I was afraid that Grandma would worry, so I hid all the discomfort during pregnancy from her and also lied to her that Jiang Cheng was very considerate to me. But in fact, Jiang Cheng wouldn't even look at me most of the time. We lived under the same roof, but he treated me as if I were transparent. I could understand him at that time. That night with him was a mistake. Even at the beginning, I thought that since Jian Cheng was drunk anyway, when everything was over, I would sneak away. As long as I didn't say anything, no one else in the world would know what happened. But the actual situation was that Jian Cheng tortured me continuously throughout the whole night. Before I regained my strength and could leave, the door was opened by Jian Cheng's grandmother who came to visit me. She understood that I had been working overtime for several days and specially brought chicken soup for me. So, things started to be like a runaway wild horse and couldn't be turned back. Jian Cheng's grandmother wasn't interested in the love affairs of young people. She only knew that Jian Cheng ruined my innocence and must be responsible. As for whether Jian Cheng had a lover, whether the Jian family was satisfied with me as a daughter-in-law, and whether I was willing to marry Jian Cheng, she didn't care at all. She only cared that she couldn't be sorry for me, and even more couldn't be sorry for my grandma. Gardenia, I've already told your grandma about you and Jian Cheng. Her health isn't good and you don't want her to worry about you, right? I can tell that you don't have no feelings for Jian Cheng. You are a good child. I know you are unwilling to destroy Jian Cheng and Xia Zhi's relationship. But things have happened. Xia Zhi won't tolerate any sand in her eyes. She and Jian Cheng have no possibility. But you and Jian Cheng still have unlimited possibilities. Don't you want to give it a try? I have to admit that I was moved for a moment. However, before I made a choice, I found out that I was pregnant. The reaction was very strong, the kind that couldn't be hidden at all. So, I had no way back. I could only bite the bullet, endure Jian Cheng's disgusted gaze, and start a marriage that was destined to be unhappy. Sometimes I hate the compromise in my bones very much. I had to pretend to be happy and sweet in front of the elders and pretend not to care in front of Jian Cheng. But in fact, I wasn't happy. I was very painful. Morning sickness was very painful, edema was very painful, cramps were very painful. Being disliked by the Jian family was very painful, being hated by Jian Cheng was very painful, and being taunted by Xia Zhi was very painful. I endured, and another birthday of mine. Grandma was very happy. She not only prepared a gift for me but also prepared a gift for my future little grandson. She said that she came this time and wouldn't leave temporarily. She had to wait until I gave birth and finished the postpartum confinement before she could be at ease. But Grandma didn't see Jiang Zilin's birth. On my birthday, I took Grandma out for dinner. She witnessed the scene of Xia Zhi and Jian Cheng holding hands intimately and kissing sweetly. Then she had a heart attack and was sent to the hospital. My resentment towards Jian Cheng probably started from that time. Obviously, the one who made the mistake wasn't me. Obviously, I was the biggest victim. Why did I have to bear all the bitter consequences? Grandma was sent to the emergency room as soon as she arrived at the hospital. Before long, the Jian family also came. Jian Cheng's grandmother slapped Jian Cheng hard in front of me. But I didn't want to stop. I just looked at the operating room expectantly, hoping that the doctor would bring me good news. However, it wasn't long before the light in the operating room went out. The doctor came out and said regretfully, asking me to hurry up and say goodbye to the old person. How ridiculous. Say goodbye. My grandma, an hour ago, was still holding my hand with a smile and saying that she made soft little clothes for the dear grandson by herself. Now, I have to say goodbye? Jian Cheng's grandmother cried very hard and kept saying sorry to me and Grandma. I couldn't hear anything. I could only hold Grandma's handly and tightly, afraid that if I let go, I would never touch her again. I know that you are not happy at all after getting married. You just don't want me to worry, so you don't say anything. Grandma lay on the hospital bed and looked at me heartbroken. Sorry, Gardenia. Grandma can't accompany you anymore in the future. She painfully shed tears, choking. Gardenia, what should we do? What if someone bullies you in the future? What if no one is good to you? Who else can I entrust you to? Good sister, don't worry. I will definitely be good to Gardenia. Jian Cheng's grandmother wept and vowed, and pulled Jian Cheng, asking him to express his stance. Jian Cheng also squatted by the bedside and said to Grandma, Grandma, don't worry. I will take good care of her in the future. Grandma looked at him with cloudy eyes and smiled sadly. The thing I regret the most in my life is that I opened my mouth and entrusted you to take care of her at the beginning. She held my hand, with deep reluctance for me in her eyes. But she eventually left. With unwillingness, with regret, with deep sorrow, she left. I held my painful belly and screamed in the operating room for most of the night in collapse and despair, and gave birth to Jiang Zilan. Perhaps Jiang Cheng felt guilty towards me. After Grandma left, he rarely met Xie Ji and often helped take care of the child. Although he still didn't talk much to me, at least we could be respectful to each other. Xie Ji went abroad because of heartbreak and rarely contacted Jiang Cheng anymore. I thought my life would be like this. Guarding a not-so-happy marriage, a husband who doesn't love me, and a lovely son. But Xie Ji came back. And as soon as she came back, she took away all the attention of Jiang Cheng and Jiang Zilan. Those affections that I might have had and the love that I never got, Xie Ji took them all without hesitation. On Jiang Zilan's birthday, she said she prepared a grand surprise for Jiang Zilan. So Jiang Zilan didn't hesitate to abandon me and run towards her. Jiang Cheng said that Xie Ji still didn't like me, so he wouldn't take me along. Before sunset, he would bring Jiang Zilan back to accompany me on my birthday. But that day, until early morning, they didn't come back. Jiang Cheng called and said that Jiang Zilan was too tired from playing and fell asleep. He was afraid of waking Jiang Zilan up, so they stayed outside. In the silent night, I sat in front of the window for a long time. I remembered before Grandma died, she held my hand and said sadly, "What if no one is good to me in the future? Grandma, I don't like celebrating birthdays anymore." Out of politeness, I let the father and son into the house and poured them water. Xiao Xiao took the calendar on the cabinet and pointed to one of the dates circled in red. "This is Mom's birthday." Jiang Zilan looked at me uneasily, his eyes moist, wanting to speak but not daring. The father and son are so alike, from appearance to words and deeds, really exactly the same. I probably just provided a womb, so there is no resemblance between Jiang Zilan and me. Jiang Cheng piled those gifts in the empty corner. This time it was my oversight. Next time, there's no need to prepare these either. I interrupted him. Next time, there's no need to come either. Jiang Cheng turned his back to me, his body stiff. After a long while, he turned around. "Sorry, can I have a private chat with you?" How rare that this sentence would come out of his mouth. I made a sweet drink for the two little ones and turned on the TV to the children's channel. Only then did I take Jiang Cheng to the gazebo in the yard. "It's very beautiful here." Jiang Cheng's movements were somehow restrained. "Thank you for the compliment." I asked him straightforwardly, "If you have something to say, please say it directly. I see that there are no other men around you at present." Jiang Cheng said, "If you don't mind, can you remarry me?" I stared at him without speaking. Jiang Cheng shifted his gaze a little embarrassedly. "I just think that we should give the child a complete family. Zilan's temperament has changed a lot recently. He's not as willful and spoiled as before." "So didn't you marry Miss Xie Ji?" Jiang Cheng was stunned. "Back then, everyone told me that she was the wife who matched you, the mother of Jiang Zilan. Although you never said this to me directly, I think you should agree. So I voluntarily vacated the position." "Why? Didn't you end up together in the end?" Jiang Cheng couldn't bear my gaze. His hand unconsciously clenched and loosened. "Those are all in the past. Me and you are also in the past. But we have a child. So what? Jiang Cheng, don't use others as an excuse anymore. It was Xie Ji before, and now it's Jiang Zilan." I smiled and said in a low voice, "Is it so hard to admit that you have feelings for me?" I used to think, in Jiang Cheng's eyes, how unworthy I was for him to be so ashamed to admit. It's really hard to hide liking. Just like I never said I loved Jiang Cheng, but my blushing ears and rapid heartbeat had already exposed me completely. My marriage with Jiang Cheng lasted for 4 years. Although I have a bit of a people-pleasing personality, if he never gave me a glimmer of hope, I couldn't hold on for 4 years. I don't know when he started to like me or exactly how much he likes me. I just inherited the habits of Grandma's generation. When something is not good, the first reaction is not to throw it away and replace it, but to mend and patch it and try to use it as much as possible. The same goes for marriage. I thought that maybe Jiang Cheng wasn't so disgusted with me. Then if I tried harder, could this marriage be better? I desperately wanted to discover his love for me from the slightest clues and then tried to gather these sporadic loves together, hoping they could illuminate my way forward. Later, I illuminated the way ahead. This road was rough, bumpy, and full of disgusting smells that made people physically uncomfortable. This love was not enough to keep me going and couldn't bring me the slightest warmth. It only made me understand more and more clearly how unbearable this marriage was. I used to think whether your sense of morality was relatively strong and you couldn't accept falling in love with another woman besides Xie. Later, I thought that if your sense of morality was really so strong, how could you still be ambiguous with your first love when you knew you were already married? In fact, you are just selfish. Even when you want to get back together with me, you have to use Jiang Zilan missing me as an excuse. But Jiang Cheng, we've been divorced for 4 years. Jiang Cheng swallowed hard with difficulty and asked me hoarsely, so, I'm late, right? It's not that you're late. I sighed gently, it's just that those have passed. Jiang Cheng, look forward. Jiang Cheng raised his hand and covered his eyes. I know his pride. Seeing him in such a sorry state, I didn't feel happy either. So I quietly got up and left this small world to him. Before leaving, he reached out and grabbed the hem of my dress. Very hard, his knuckles turned white and the veins protruded. He has lost a lot of weight and there is an indelible air of decadence about him. I heard his suppressed sobs and saw his trembling shoulders. After Jiang Cheng and Lin Ji divorced, for a long time, the atmosphere in the Jiang family was very depressed. The woman who was not welcomed by everyone finally left, but the expected relief did not come. Jiang Cheng had always been taciturn. After the divorce, he spoke even less. He was busy with work, either on a business trip or on the way to a business trip. Even when he came home, he often just collapsed and went to sleep. Jiang Zilan was carefree. He held the nanny's hand and ran around all day. If he was not satisfied, he would cry and make a fuss. But one day, he suddenly asked, "Where's Mom?" The nanny didn't know how to answer. Jiang Zilan was very proactive. He got under the table, into the closet, and in the garden. After searching for a long time, he found nothing. Hey! Where on earth did Mom hide? Children have short memories, but Jiang Zilan was very smart. He could even clearly recall the scene of the last meeting with Lin Ji. That morning, before Lin Ji went out, she smiled and bent over, touching his head. "Zilan, Mom is leaving. I used to always hope that you would be a well-behaved and obedient child, but now I understand that you are different from me. You have the capital to be willful. In the days to come, be happy." At that time, Jiang Zilan didn't take these words to heart. He was tired of Lin Ji's preaching and Lin Ji's control over him. But at this moment, when he remembered those words again, when he looked around this huge villa and found that Lin Ji's figure was no longer in any corner, he finally realized belatedly and began to feel sad. That evening, when Jiang Cheng came home, Jiang Zilan took the initiative to hold his hand for the first time. "Dad, did you quarrel with Mom?" Jiang Cheng stopped and looked down at him. On Jiang Zilan's young face, his eyebrows knitted together. "Can you take the initiative to apologize and make up with Mom? I haven't seen her for a long time. I want to eat Mom's sweet and sour pork ribs. Can I have it tonight?" Jiang Cheng looked at the naturalness on Jiang Zilan's face. First, he was expressionless, and then gradually showed a malicious smile. "I didn't quarrel with her. I divorced her. Do you know what divorce is? Divorce means, she doesn't want you anymore. She won't see you again. No matter what you want to do, she won't care about you anymore. She abandoned you, understand?" He seemed to enjoy the fear on Jiang Zilan's face and repeated it again. "Jiang Zilan, she doesn't want you. She will have other children in the future, more obedient and cuter than you. In her heart, you have no weight anymore. You're lying. Mom won't not want me." Jiang Zilan screamed, "You are the one who was abandoned. Mom said that she loves me the most. She lied to you?" Jiang Cheng laughed. "Jiang Zilan, you were deceived. Loves you the most? Ha, do you believe such nonsense?" "Jiang Cheng, what nonsense are you talking to the child?" The elders of the Jiang family rushed over and hugged the emotionally collapsed Jiang Zilan in their arms and coaxed him in a low voice. "Zilan, don't cry. Dad is teasing you. I want Mom. Mom has something to do recently and went back to her hometown. She will be back in a few days, okay?" No. I want to see her now." Jiang Zilan struggled hard. What Jiang Cheng hated the most was Jiang Zilan's willful appearance. He watched Jiang Zilan crying and making a fuss indifferently, like an outsider, without a trace of emotion. Even when Jiang Zilan cried until he almost vomited, he just frowned and turned upstairs. All the furnishings in the bedroom were exactly the same as before Lin Ji left, including the huge wedding photo on the wall. Sometimes Jiang Cheng didn't understand what he was thinking. When he broke up with Xia Ji before, he blacklisted, deleted the number, and threw away the token of love. He wished that all the items related to the other party would completely disappear from his world. But after the divorce from Lin Ji, he threw nothing away. As if throwing things away would mean he had lost. He tried his best to keep his emotions stable to prove that Lin Ji's leaving had no impact on him. He thought that it was just a woman he didn't love. Divorce for him should be liberation. Half a year after the divorce from Lin Ji, Xia Ji took the initiative to ask him if he wanted to get married. Jiang Cheng was silent for a while and said, "Forget it." Jiang Zilan was making a fuss about looking for her 2 days ago. "If I marry you, he might throw a tantrum and cause chaos." Xia Ji looked into his eyes and asked him, "You don't marry me? Is it really just because of Jiang Zilan? Otherwise?" Xia Ji laughed, slightly mockingly. "Jiang Cheng, sometimes I admire you. After all, you even deceive yourself." Jiang Cheng didn't understand. What had he deceived himself about? When Jiang Zilan was 18 years old, Jiang Cheng was still single. But Lin Ji got married. She married a programmer who was shy and quiet but very good to her. Perhaps because of love for the one and concern for the other, even Jiang Zilan, the stepson, was cared for by the programmer. On the wedding day, Jiang Zilan attended the wedding. After coming back, at the dinner table, he voluntarily mentioned to Jiang Cheng that the atmosphere at the wedding was great. There weren't many guests, but it was very lively. Upon hearing this, Jiang Cheng just chewed the food in his mouth silently and didn't even bother to give a glance. This was the usual way the father and son got along. Between them, there wasn't much affection or words. Just like a typical wealthy family, they were polite but not intimate. So Jiang Zilan didn't know that actually Jiang Cheng also went on the wedding day. Not only did he go, but he also gave a red envelope. Inside was a bank card. Lin Ji didn't take it. "Keep it. I know you don't need this, but it's just a token of my intention. I can't give you anything else." Lin Ji shook her head. "You don't need to give me anything." She was wearing a simple dress, not as grand as when she married Jiang Cheng, but the smile on her face was much more genuine. Jiang Cheng only took one look and then shifted his gaze. He was afraid that if he took one more look, he would be in a sorry state and shed tears, and then beg Lin Ji not to get married and not to abandon him. The dressing room was very quiet. Someone knocked on the door. "Is the bride ready? It's time to go on stage." "Okay." Lin Ji stood up and asked Jiang Cheng, "Zilan is also outside. Why don't we have a meal together before leaving?" "No." Jiang Cheng shook his head, stood up, and walked towards the door first. Holding the doorknob, Jiang Cheng suddenly said, "By the way, there are some things I haven't told you before." "Huh?" "I was jealous of Jiang Zilan and Grandma before." Lin Ji was surprised. "What did you say?" "Everyone said that you loved me deeply, but I always felt that in your heart, Grandma was more important than me." Jiang Cheng's tone was calm, "So I've always been unhappy. Later when Jiang Zilan was born, no matter what you and I were doing, as soon as Jiang Zilan cried, you no longer had me in your eyes." Jiang Cheng said, "So, I've always hated Jiang Zilan too. Maybe subconsciously, I always wanted to have all your attention." Jiang Cheng smiled self-mockingly. "Unfortunately, I don't have such good fortune. So even what was originally had was lost together. Also, I wasn't drunk and disorderly. That night, I was very sober." Jiang Cheng finally looked back at Lin Ji. "If you're not happy in the future, come to me at any time. But if you're very happy, don't tell me. You know, I'm not a good person. Seeing that your happiness is not with me, I actually quite want to cause trouble." From the first day the programmer appeared beside Lin Ji, Jiang Cheng actually knew. The urge to destroy in his heart instantly broke out of the cage. He was like an ugly bug, lurking in the dark and planning to ruin Lin Ji's second spring. But Lin Ji's smile was so beautiful. She looked really happy. Not witnessing Lin Ji and the programmer's wedding in person was already the greatest blessing Jiang Cheng could give. Was he sad? Yes, he was. Was he regretful? Yes, he was. But no matter how sad or regretful, in this life, he and Lin Ji could only end here. Jiang Cheng remembered that year, when he first met Lin Ji. He was sent by his grandmother to pick up the bumpkin from the countryside. Actually, he was very reluctant. 1 second before seeing Lin Ji, he was still complaining to his friends on his phone. But he raised his head, and the moment he saw Lin Ji, he almost stopped breathing. She was like the cool breeze that swept away all the heat and sweltering of midsummer, leaving only the cicadas chirping on the branches and the fragmented sunlight among the treetops. The palpitation was in an instant. He did many things he couldn't understand himself. In every gap of life, his gaze unconsciously stayed on her. By the time he came to his senses, there was no going back between them. He watched helplessly as the sunlight on her became less and less, and the shadow became larger and larger. At that time, he really thought that she would stay by his side for a lifetime. In a daze, Jiang Cheng seemed to have a dream. In the dream, he returned to the day of their wedding. The master of ceremonies held the microphone and asked him, regardless of poverty or wealth, illness or health, "Mr. Jiang Cheng, are you willing to marry Miss Lin Ji?" He heard his answer, "I do."